Hi folks, today I will be comparing the brand new Tamron 70-180 f2.8 G2 and the new Sony 70-200 f4 with the 2x teleconverter. Now I typically wouldn't make a video like this, but I personally am in the market for a lens that has more reach. So I went out and bought both lenses and the teleconverter with my own money and did a comparison on several different dimensions that were of interest to myself. And then as I got close to finishing the comparison, I realized, oh, I have all this footage. I might as well share it in case others are also looking at these two different lenses. So why these two lenses? One is f2.8 and one is f4. The reason is because I'm looking for a small, compact, lightweight travel lens with more reach. And both of these fit the bill. If you look at like the 70-200 f2.8 G Master or at the new Sigma 70-200, they are both really large and heavy lenses, which just wouldn't be great for travel purposes. So I settled on these two. So throughout this video, what you'll notice is that most of the clips are actually video clips and not pictures. And there's two reasons for that. One is I'll be using this primarily for video, and so I wanted to see how it handled. And then I also think using it for video when doing comparisons is really helpful because it gives a more raw look into how the lenses handle overall, not just in the specific test. So I'll be comparing the lenses on 5 different dimensions. I'll start with macro, then stabilization, then sharpness, focus, and then bokeh. And then at the end, I'll also have several minutes of real world footage. For me, this is equally, if not more important when it comes to comparing multiple lenses. And of course, throughout all this, I'll also be comparing the Sony with and without the 2x teleconverter. So let's jump into the macro abilities. So to start off, there are a few things about the Sony that are really cool. First is that whether you're shooting at 70mm or 200mm, the subject is going to be the same size when you're shooting at the minimum focus distance. This is not true for the Tamron, which you'll see soon. The other thing that's really cool about the Sony is that the minimum focus distance does not change when a teleconverter is used, as you can see in these next shots. And here's a comparison of all of them together. For stabilization, I did several head-to-head comparisons of handheld videos. At 70mm, the Sony stabilization is fantastic. Here's also a video of me walking forward at 70mm. At 200mm, the stabilization is good if I really focus on keeping it still. With the teleconverter, 140 actually is pretty good, but at 400, I found it to be a real challenge to get stable footage. Here I used the basic stabilization feature in Final Cut Pro, and it really wasn't bad. I could probably get decent handheld footage with the 400mm. Throughout this, I really expected the native Sony lens to perform better with stabilization, but I honestly didn't notice any difference between the two lenses. All right, coming to sharpness. Now this wasn't done in a professional studio, so I know it's not perfect. And it's actually shot outside and there was a little bit of wind during the shoot. So this hopefully gives a real world view of how these lenses actually perform. But there could be several factors that impact the image quality. But to be honest, I felt like I got enough signal from this comparison to identify overall what the sharpness would look like. So with these images, you'll also see that I increased the image to 200% to do the comparison. I found that with the Sony, it looked great at 70mm. When it came to using the teleconverter, there was a noticeable loss in sharpness at 400mm. This difference is especially noticeable when you're comparing the two if you're looking at the 70 and 400 side by side. Now for the Tamron, I first compared it at 2.8 and f4 since I was shooting the Sony lens at f4. And I didn't really find there to be any difference with the sharpness, so I'll just use 2.8 for these comparisons. So at 70mm, the Sony and Tamron, to me, both looked identical. At the long end, once again, they really looked identical. If anything, I'd say the Tamron looked a little bit better, but honestly, in real world shooting, I don't know that there's gonna be any noticeable difference. Now, focus is an interesting one. When changing focus between objects, I didn't notice any significant differences between the Tamron, Sony, or the Sony with the teleconverter. I did have to move the object a little bit further away with the teleconverter just because I was shooting at f8 and it was a little bit more difficult to tell when it was in or out of focus. So it's not really a perfect comparison, but honestly in the real world shooting, which you'll see later, I just didn't notice any real world differences when it comes to the focus with any of the three options. The one big difference that did show up is when zooming in and out. The Tamron loses focus when zooming quickly, and this didn't happen with the Sony. To be honest, this is really annoying, but is it a deal breaker? I don't think it is. I think it's just more annoyance than anything. So my second to last test was Bokeh. This is really nothing special. You can see the subject background separation look the best with the Tamron. Obviously I'm shooting at f2.8. And then also with the 400mm, even though I'm shooting at f8, it's just such a long focal range, you're getting a nice depth of field. So nothing mind-blowing with this comparison, probably just what you would expect. And then finally, the test that probably is most important to me is the real life footage. So I applied the same neutral LUT to all of this footage and no other modifications were made. And also all the footage was shot in 24p. And I left the shaky footage in there just to show how these lenses work in a real world situation. So really there weren't a lot of changes made to this footage besides the neutral LUT that was applied. All right, so which lens am I gonna get? The Sony is really an incredible lens when it comes to versatility. You can shoot the entire 70-200 range. You can also shoot up to 400 if you have the 2x teleconverter, and then you also have those great macro capabilities. I thought it was sharp, it had great stabilization, so no complaints there. And honestly, when it came to real world shooting, I thought that the 400 footage was actually more than usable. Even though in the head-to-head comparisons of sharpness, it was less, it really, I couldn't significantly tell when it came to actual video footage that was coming out of the lens. As far as the cons go, with the teleconverter, it also doubles the aperture to f8 from f4. And to me, I just don't know that that's that usable in a lot of cases. If I'm shooting during the daytime, it's totally fine, but I shoot a lot in the evenings and at night, and I don't know that I could really use it as frequently as I want. And then the other thing is probably just a personal opinion, but I thought that the footage that came out of the Sony, both with and without the teleconverter, I thought the footage was a little bit more like vanilla or bland when compared to the Tamron. By itself, I probably would have thought it looked fantastic, but when comparing the two, I really thought the Tamron looked a lot better. So with the Tamron, I thought that the sharpness and stabilization were actually both fantastic. I also really liked the subject background separation. I mean, that's no surprise, it's an f2.8 versus an f4, but I did think it looked really nice. And the other thing I liked is I thought the color rendition and the saturation coming out of the lens were just fantastic. When compared with the Sony, I, in every shot, preferred the look coming out of the Tamron, not just for the bokeh, but because of the colors and the saturation and just overall look of the image, I thought looked fantastic. I also don't think I'll be doing any true macro, so I think what I could get at 70mm with the Tamron is probably okay. It's not ideal. It sometimes would be nice to be able to, at 200mm, be able to get a similar look because maybe there's like bees on a flower and I don't want to get close to those bees. And so being able to shoot at 200 is a lot better than being able to shoot at 70. But I think overall it's fine and it's not going to be a total deal breaker. So the biggest cons for me with the Tamron are first that zoom issue. When zooming in and out quickly, the fact that it goes out of focus before it focuses again, it's not a huge deal breaker, but honestly, it's kind of annoying. And then also the fact that it's not teleconverter compatible. Now I know that this is probably not Tamron's fault. I think Sony probably locks this down so people will buy native Sony lenses, but it's also kind of annoying. It would be super nice to be able to take a teleconverter on trips with me and be able to extend the range of this lens. Even if I'm doubling a 2.8 aperture to 5.6, I think that's a lot more usable for me than f8 in a lot of situations. And it would just be nice to have that for travel purposes because it's such a lightweight way to get a lot more reach with a lens. But like I said, it's not Tamron's fault. I don't think that they can't make it compatible with the Sony teleconverters, but it is what it is. It's a con for this lens. All right, so with all that said, which lens did I go with? I actually went with the Tamron. I was thinking initially on the outset that I was gonna go with the Sony and the teleconverter because I like the versatility of that, but I actually liked the look of the Tamron shots so much more than I liked the look of the Sony shots, which I know is very a personal thing and subjective. So that may not be the case for everybody, but I really liked the way that looked. I also liked the low light capabilities with the f2.8. And then I also do like that it's more discreet than the Sony lenses. So the Sony lenses do look really cool in person with the white, the grayish white that's on them. But in a lot of cases, when I'm traveling around, I want to draw as little attention to myself as possible. And so having an all black lens really helps with that, especially with these lenses, which are a lot bigger and naturally draw a lot of attention to them anyways. So that was a win for me with the Tamron, but honestly, I just really liked the image that was coming out of the Tamron with the colors and the saturation. So that's the lens I chose. I hope that if you're watching this and you've gotten this far, that you have found something that is helpful for you. Like I said, I did this comparison mostly just for myself to choose which lens I wanted to, but maybe there's other people who are interested in some of these comparisons as well. And if you are one of them, I hope this was helpful. So thank you for watching. Bye.